First, want to introduce. I mean, you're in for a treat. Well, if you like drones, you're in for a treat. Edgar Allain is from Transport Canada. He's going to tell us about where we're at right now as far as regulations go and what you need to do to operate a drone. And there are some exciting changes coming.
Yes, sir.
I was terrified up until he told me that because I didn't know what was going to happen next. And Mark Langille, did I get that right? Langille, I'm sorry. I keep trying to do the French thing, and I butcher that equally. He's from Flitelab, and they've been, how long have you been in operation now?
Over the past 3 years.
3 years. And the neat thing about them is not only do they do great stuff, specifically in Atlantic Canada, but they're incredibly responsible. And they push the responsibility part of operating a drone, which is really important, I know, to me and certainly to Transport Canada. A little bit about myself, College in the North Atlantic. We were the first college in Canada to announce that we were incorporating drones into journalism, into our curriculum. Langille College followed right almost directly after us, and now I hear Nova Scotia Community College has 2 drones. So I believe that makes 4 or 5 schools in Canada that use drones as part of their media programs, which is excellent. I first started seeing drones in about 2012. I was following people like Matt Schroyer, Matt Waite, and Ian Hanna. And I safely say that Ian Hanna, who's a cameraman who did a lot of work with CBC in Toronto, is probably the father of drone journalism in this country. And I just started seeing it. I thought, well, this is neat. This is interesting. I don't really understand what it is, but I'm going to follow it. And so one of the first things I did was I went into Google Alerts and I put in drones and drone journalism. And I was getting a slew of emails, and these emails just kept compiling. And I realized, okay, there's something here. There's something to this. So I started looking into it, reading everything I could about it, and I said, we've got to bring this into our curriculum. This is exciting. But let me be clear that it's just a platform. That's all it is. And I looked at it, I saw a comment from a teacher who was one of the testers for Google Glass. I don't know if you remember that horribly failed experiment. And their comment was, you know, for what this thing costs, if it doesn't work and we end up throwing it in the closet and forgetting about it, so what? We tried it. We brought it in, we showed it to the students, and you know, we asked them, how do we use it? And that's what I did with the drone. I didn't tell the students, this is what we're going to do with it. I said, how do we use this? And last year we were the first college in Canada to bring in an actual course on drone. It's called Drone Journalism Technology. And that course is exactly the same thing. It's elective. It's journalism. Students get first crack at it. And that is what we tell them. We say, okay, what are we going to do with this? How can we use this machine? It became apparent to me as I was doing this that there was a lot of paranoia in the public. Paranoia was rampant. And there was also no ethical code for the drones. Matt Schroyer and his group, the Professional Society of Drone Journalists, had done a little bit of a conduct code, but I said, I need to expand on this. As much, because we could lose that to the public, was my fear. If the public got paranoid enough and thought that these things were going to be invasive, that public pressure could rob us of that. So I wrote a code of conduct, drone journalism code of conduct, which everybody's got a copy of it on their tables. And I put that out there specifically as much to get everybody on the same page as to, you know, calm the fears of the public. And one of the biggest lines in that, a lot of it's kind of technical, you know, as far as operating the drone, but is that drones will never be used to search for a story. That's not what they're used for. They're used at a story to get something, some kind of epic shot. For instance, the easiest one that I always throw out there is an illegal dumping site. I don't know about Nova Scotia, but in Newfoundland we have a terrible problem with that. So you walk into the woods, yeah, you see a fridge in the middle of the woods and you wonder how it got there, but all that shows you is the fridge. If you fly a drone 50 feet over that site, all of a sudden you see a site that stretches for half a mile, a block, just garbage littered through the trees. Deforestation with logging companies, the same thing. Newfoundland's a beautiful spot. You know, you drive through Newfoundland, go, look at all the trees. Yeah, but when you launch a drone and you go up, the trees only go 300 meters in, and then there's no trees. They've been cut down. But you don't see that from the road. And you don't see the scar, right? So that's what we use drones for. We use them to add that epic, that epic piece to a story. But they're not to be used to look for stories. You're not to fly through your neighborhood looking for the guy selling pot on the street corner. You can let the police do that, and then the public can get upset with the police. But that's not what they're to be used for. They're to be used for a portion of the story. And it's not just footage. It's from an environmental point of view, you can put environmental sensors on them, so you can do your own air quality testing. You can do your own water quality testing. You can use LiDAR on them. You can use forms of GPS. All these, we're getting to data journalism right now, which is really the big thing. And drones are perfect platforms to carry those kind of tools to capture that kind of data. I don't want to take too long here, but what I'd like to do is to show you a little video that we did. For the first year now, we're doing Capstone project. We've never done one before. I've got a very small team working on this, and they're working very hard. And we're doing it on the potential Viking find in Cape Anguille and Point Rosie, it's called. And so we went up there and we did a bunch of interviews, and we took the drone. We took 2 of our drones, and we captured a bunch of footage. So this is just the rough teaser, and I hope what this is going to show you is the epic nature that a drone can lend to a story. But please, it's only part of the story. It's no different than a still image on the ground, words, video, any kind of thing that you would do in a multimedia piece. This is just one part of it. Let's hope this works.
That I'm pretty convinced is a Viking site. As a matter of fact, I'm convinced that it's the major center of activity that might be part of.
Well, if they actually proved that there's Vikings been here, I would say it's going to make a big difference.
So that's how you use a drone for those shots, to give that, like the lighthouse shot and the shot that you saw at the end. That's actually that's Point Rosie. That's where they believe there is another Viking settlement, and that's how you use the drone. You don't use it for all the shots. For instance, the sheep. Like, yeah, let's fly the drone over the sheep. What would be the point of that other than to harass the sheep? There's no point to that shot. There's nothing epic about flying a drone over sheep. But there is something epic about that shot around the lighthouse or the shot up over the Cape, and that's how a drone should be used. From an education point of view, how can you incorporate drones into your classroom? There's a few important things you need to do. The first thing is you just don't go out and buy a DJI Phantom or you know, something along those lines, or a Typhoon or something, and give it to your students and say, go fly it. The reality is that a drone is a flying lawnmower, and it will hurt people. And they fly, for instance, the Phantom flies at 15 meters a second, which is what, 40, 50 kilometers an hour,
Yeah.
roughly? So basically almost highway speeds. So by the time you realize you're in trouble, you've hurt somebody. So they can be dangerous. The first step for you to do is to buy some simulators. They're not expensive. They come with the transmitter. They come with the software. They're around anywhere from $120 to $150. Microsoft just came out with one, Real Flight, just for drones. That's all it's for. It has little courses in it, so students have to complete these little obstacle courses, you know, to learn how to operate the drone. Then you go out and you buy a cheap drone. I recommend, and your purchasing agents might have an issue with this, but I recommend the Star Wars Millennium Falcon drone, because it can bounce off walls, it's easy to fly, and it teaches them how to use the sticks. The first mistake students make when flying a drone is they jam the stick forward. And of course the drone goes straight up in the air and is never seen again. They're little movements on the drone, really tiny. You almost can't perceive the movements on the sticks. And this Falcon will teach them that with minimal damage. Don't go out and get a drone with a camera on it and all that kind of stuff. So then they're looking at the screen and they're looking at pictures and everything, and they're getting overwhelmed. There's too much information. Get them a drone that they can fly and learn the basics of. And then once they learn the basics of that, then go buy your Phantom, go buy your Inspire, go buy your Typhoon, go buy whatever drone the college is willing to fund, and then have some fun with it. Mark?
Yeah, so we kind of, where I come from it as is Flitelab, we're a local operator doing UAV services. So we build systems, we fly systems, we consult on regulatory side if people need some help or questions on what Edgar's going to speak to on the regulation side. So there's a lot of elements that go into it. It's like you say, it's not run out and buy a drone and then you're operating. There's learning to fly them. There is the regulatory side of flying them safely and properly, and then there's becoming efficient and competent at it. It's like anything. You're basically putting a camera in the air. So I mean, part of the challenge is, you have to fly it. You have to get your shot. You have to do it safely. So there's a lot of things coming in. So it's, yes, you can get footage by just getting up in the air. The challenge really becomes, is it quality footage that you want to use as well? And I think we've seen a lot of that over probably the last 6 months to a year. Things have been improving. People are not as impressed with the aerial shot anymore, just because every second YouTube video is a drone doing something. And we see it a lot because we're out shooting, for the last 3+ years. Aerials can get very boring very quickly. And the key is making it part of a story. It's not a replacement for anything else. It's another perspective. So it's incorporating aerial footage with, handheld footage, traditional ways of getting media. Some stories may be more directed towards aerials. Some they may not apply at all. So I wouldn't look at them too as a tool that, we have to use the drone on every story. That's not really the case. I won't get into a lot of detail. We have a presentation, but it covers end to end on the system. We just started off. I mean, for example, that's one of our larger systems. It's carrying a DSLR camera. It's a high definition video feed. This is where we were probably 2 years ago. Now the same system has been compressed down into, like, you can get a DJI Phantom 4 or an Inspire, replaces this system. It's smaller, it's safer, it's easier to operate. So what we're seeing in the market is technology is really making everything smaller and easier. So it is putting in the hands of a lot of people, which has its good and bad sides, and that's why we need regulation and safety, is because you can run down to Best Buy right now, and basically the time it takes you to charge a battery, you can be in the air. Which is good, but it's also, that's the issue people run into. Is it's one thing to have one of these systems, and because of the systems on board, I mean, they're GPS, they are self-stabilizing, they'll hold position, they'll return to home if something goes wrong. All great features to help get you in the air. The challenge becomes, that's also what gets you into trouble. people are in over their head a lot of times just jumping into it. It seems really easy to do it, but when you start operating, in more urban environments, or there's other structures around, or potential interference from radios. We did a lot of work with Southwest on the old CBC building while it was operational, which, if anyone's been on the roof of that building, it's basically antennas and directional feeds. So there's things like that always have to be taken into account. It's not just get in the air. There's a whole site survey process that we go through to say, is it safe to fly here to begin with? And the answer may be no. So again, it's not always the solution. The other part of that, and this is from a journalism, commercial side, this is where it gets complicated. Us as commercial operators, we're very specific on what we're allowed to do. We need permission from the property owners. We're limited to certain height limits based on our certificate. Where it gets gray, and I've spoken to journalism before, is around where that line is between what journalism is allowed to do and what you're allowed to do under basically the regulations from Transport Canada. So you need to be careful in what you're doing. A lot of what's involved in going out and flying these too, it's coordinating with people, airspace, air traffic control. So I think in a lot of cases, a drone lends itself much better to, say, a story-driven article or a documentary, not so much on the newscasting side. It's hard to take these systems and say there's a fire down the street, run out the door and go do that, because you may not have time to coordinate who you need to talk to do it safely. So if you're out in the country, there's a little bit more flexibility, but again, it's speaking to it's not a replacement for like a mobile news crew at this point. I know CNN and some other groups are looking at that, but I think it's somewhat restricted by the regulation in terms of what can be done safely. So a lot of what we do, we've done everything from TV and film. Our stuff gets used on the news mainly because CBC can't go out and shoot, so a lot of times our footage will end up there. What I'll do is I'll run through just a sample clip of kind of, some of the work we've done. We did a shoot out in Peggy's Cove from Maclean's magazine. They were doing a story on the bagpiper. So in this case, we can fly by this person because he's part of our operation. We didn't just go out to Peggy's Cove and fly by the bagpiper, 10 feet away from him. There's cases where you can do certain things and there's cases where you can't. And again, flying over public is not one of the things you're allowed to do. It's a safety concern, it's a risk. So again, from a news perspective, that becomes more of an issue, being able to get out there and do things. This was one we recently did. I can get this to... This was the arrival of the Mexican tall ship last week, 2 weeks ago. Again, this was coordinated through Waterfront Development, Port Authority, the Navy, air traffic control, plus we have an SFOC. So it wasn't, let's run down and shoot the tall ship coming into the harbor.
You have a blanket FOC for Nova Scotia.
We do. So in our case, we don't have to basically go to Transport Canada to apply for this as a separate mission, but we still do have to do all the coordination and safety side of things. So in this case, this is a little bit easier. We're shooting from the water side, so we're able to keep our distances to people, that sort of thing. But again, it really depends. The downside of this, and Edgar can speak to the regulations, is 2 days later someone went down and did the same shot recreationally where they flew up and down the waterfront. Again, we can't do that. And it's not even so much that we can't do it. We don't want to do that. I don't want to fly over a crowd of people. The risk is too high. I mean, these are magical pieces of flying apparatus of electronics. Electronics fail no matter how good it is and how well you maintain your systems. Systems can fail. So you always have to have that in mind, like, what's the worst possible thing that can happen and what is my procedure that I'm in right now? In this case, we have the harbor as our ditching area. If something goes wrong, the first case is public safety. It's not returning the drone. Yes, it's a lot of money to put in the harbor, but it's much worse to injure somebody or damage property. So there's that thought that has to go into it as you're kind of incorporating it into what you're doing. And then the other side of that is it is just a tool. Treat it as another feed of content is the way that we see it. In this case, yes, that's all aerial. That's our footage. But if you were telling a story about that tall ship, it wouldn't just be endless aerial shots. There'd be, handheld on board and more involved in it. So it's, in a lot of cases, what we do is we more shoot footage that gets used by a third party. So we'll have a client that, in this case, was Waterfront Development. they wanted shots of the ship coming in to make part of kind of what they provide is a business that operates the harbor. It's not, the intent wasn't to go to like just push out a video about this tall ship. It was really, this is ongoing footage. Same as if we do something for a movie. You know, we've spent days out shooting, for example, at Peggy's Cove. We had a whole day shoot doing aerials for a TV commercial. Most people know how long a TV commercial is. So, you know, you literally shoot 3 to 4 hours of footage. Probably about half a second to a second of that ends up in the end product. So again, it's, you know, the goal is not all aerials, it's getting the right shot. So it's, you know, and it takes a lot of time and skill. It's, you know, these are, you know, it's one thing to be standing on the ground with a camera trying to operate it. You're literally standing on the ground with a camera that's up over there trying to operate it. Now, the one upside on this is technology is moving super fast. The systems we fly now, we have a live 720p live feed to the ground. So you're seeing what you're shooting. And you're seeing it in good quality where you're not kind of guessing like, yeah, I can frame the shot, but I can't tell color, I can't tell focus. Now that's possible. Our systems have full camera control. We're changing aperture, exposure, shutter speed, all in real time in the air. And on our latest system, on the Inspire that we fly mostly now, we're running a zoom lens as well. So we can do a zoom capability in the air, switch from photo to video on the fly. So the nice thing for that is what it does. It reduces the number of flights we need to do because we can do so much more of it while we're up there, which in turn reduces your exposure to risk. And you know, we look at it as the least amount of time I can spend in the air. It's safer and it's cheaper because every moment that's in the air is a potential for it to go into the harbor. Where we are in Nova Scotia, over the last year, I would say 90% of our work is over water. So there's no going and picking up the parts. It's, you know, you wave goodbye to it at that point. Fortunately, we've been lucky.
You cry.
You cry and you try not to think about it too long, but I mean that has to be in the back of your mind. You know, don't invest in this if you don't have the money to replace it. What we tell people generally is if you can't afford to lose it at any point in time, don't put it in the air, because it is a reality if something can happen. I mean, you could have a bird strike or just a failure. So it's really, again, it's I don't want to eat up too much time, kind of going to go over what we do, but again, treat it as a tool. Take your time, you know, make sure you understand the regulations, get proper training on it, and you know, and get a system and get your hands on it. I mean, that's really how you're going to really learn in the end. Is, you know, take your time, but you know, it is a hands-on thing. You don't learn to be a camera operator overnight. You're not going to learn to be a drone operator overnight. So you know, it's consider it a learning curve and kind of, you know, take it slow and steady. But I think the technology is there where, you know, a year ago you had to know a little bit about what you're doing. We're almost to the point now that it's basically push a button and it goes up. I mean, there's software now that'll do full mapping systems from takeoff to landing. The Phantom 4 now has vision tracking on an object. You can click on the screen and say, I want to follow this person. And I won't say you don't need a camera operator. That's kind of the thought process. Anyone that's framed a shot knows that there's more to it than just putting someone in the middle of the screen. But there's a lot of tools now that are making that easier.
Sorry, I'm not. This is
No,
not.
that's.
I'm just.
I don't want to eat into everyone's time too
just,
much, but
no.
It's yeah. So I mean that's really where we're coming from. And if you ever have any questions around, you know, what's a system we should do, you know, certainly contact us or Jeff. We have a blog where we try to put a lot of information on it, be it regulatory, safety, even recommendations on kind of where to start out there. So unlike a lot of operators, we spend a lot of time educating. We see it as we want to grow an industry, not just grow a company. So we do a lot, you know, working with Transport Canada. You know, we do it by the regulations. Some people don't, but we see it. If we're here for the long haul and we want this industry to be safe and grow, everyone has to be responsible, and that's been our approach.
Flitelab.com, just before we get to Edgar, Flitelab.com is a great resource. It's an awesome research source. It tells you about, you know, SFOCs, the regulations, and that kind of thing. And of course, Transport Canada has its own website that you can check. One thing I want to just clarify, because I know Mark and I talk drones all the time, so, you know, it's kind of a major geek fest. And so we'll talk in things that maybe you don't understand, and I'll apologize in advance. But there's kind of 3 levels of flyers out there. You have the recreational flyers, the guys who go to the park and just fly, and then you have the commercial flyers. And basically, the definition of a commercial flyer is any operator who's paid to fly a drone, sell the data, or in the case of the college, any post-secondary institution, we're considered commercial. So we're commercial, and we have to operate under different regulations, under Transport Canada regulations. Then you have the out-of-the-box flyers, and they're the guys who strap the Roman candles onto the skids of the drone and shoot them at their friends and chase them across the lake bed. They're the problem. The recreational flyers are not the problem. The commercial flyers aren't the problem. It's the guy who buys a drone, takes out the quick start card, and he's launched 3 minutes after he gets it. That's the issue we're dealing with, because the public doesn't differentiate between that. They don't see, oh, Mark's a commercial flyer, he's one of the good guys, and then see the other guys who are, the out-of-the-box flyers who are harassing wildlife, threatening people and property. They don't see the difference. They don't make that. They don't distinguish between them, and that's part of our challenge. Is one of the things we were talking about, starting an association to deal with that. Anyway, I don't want to take any more time from Edgar, because I think you got some good news for us.
Well, I think I do as well. But first of all, I'm really glad to be here. I've got about 33 years of commercial aviation experience under my belt, I guess, and started flying when I was 16 through the Air Cadet program. Any former Air Cadets in the crowd here? Very good. But a lot of my work with Transport Canada for the past 17 years has been safety education and promotion. And this portfolio is relatively new to me. I'm going to tell you it's about a month that I've been on the portfolio of drones and UAVs, as we call them, unmanned air vehicles. But again, my role is simply the safety promotion and education. And we have operational inspectors in the Moncton office who will actually work with individuals and organizations to get their special flight operations certificates. We're going to start off by just talking a little bit about where we are. And I can tell you some good news as we're moving forward to streamline processes. We have some challenges ahead, and some of them we've already talked about. We're aware of those, but we do want feedback. It's very important as we're developing standards and regulations that we actually get the feedback now, as we hope to have new regulations in place by 2017. That is the aim point. Of course, things take time, but we have work groups. We have a lot of people working on the actual issues at hand. Just to go, who here ever flew or even built a balsa airplane, model airplane when you were a kid, right? Right? Who here flew a model airplane before? I tried to fly one. It wasn't very successful. In the older days, you would just basically spend 3 months to build it, and if you didn't know what you were doing, within 30 seconds you'd crash it, and it was back to the drawing board, right? So what's happened is that we've come a long way from that technology. But interestingly enough, when I was a kid growing up in Moncton, there's a small uncontrolled airport there called McEwen's Airfield. And model airplanes were very, very prevalent there. They were part of an association that I'll talk about in a second. But model airplanes were prevalent. As a matter of fact, drones. I was introduced to drones in 1972, and I wasn't even a teenager yet. Maybe that's a lie, I'm not sure. But having said that, at the airport, the operator there bought 86 F-86 Sabre jets from the Canadian Air Force through Crown Assets. And they were actually rebuilding these jets in my backyard. And they were shipping them to the U.S. Army in Mojave Desert to a company called Flight Systems Incorporated. Bottom line was, this is the 1970s, where these actual fighter jets were being flown out of the Mojave Desert, pilotless, remote controlled, and used as target practice for the U.S. Army. So the idea for some people is that, oh my God, this is all brand new. In some ways it is, but in some ways it isn't. This is the kind of model that I was probably alluding to in my earlier years when I was first introduced to model airplanes. And a lot of us were first introduced to drones. We're frozen by this guy. Whoops. There's a pause there. We've all seen this before. Who has? Who has seen this, right? The Afghan war, Iraqi war. This machine, believe it or not, flies at 25,000 feet. It weighs 1,200 pounds, and it's a $20 million piece of equipment. And they've been in operation since March of 2005. So, you know, for a lot of people, though, this was their first introduction to drones, 2005. But as I was saying, drones and that type of operation has been around since the early 70s. And of course, now we have you know, what we used to think were model airplanes. And for some people, and we'll talk about the differences, the model airplane and the drone have, you know, the drones, especially for this type of camera work and all the wonderful work that's being done in the broadcasting field and the media. It's incredible the platforms that they have to work with now. So we've come a long way from the simple model airplane. Interesting. So I promise you this won't be death by PowerPoint. I do have quite a few slides, but I'm going to go through a lot of them quite quickly. I just want you to get a gist that there has been a lot of work done. There are some serious challenges, but at the same time, a lot of things are being managed, and I believe moving forward, you're going to see a new set of regulations beyond the ones I'm going to show you that are going to really streamline the operation. As a matter of fact, right now, just about every commercial operation that's being done has to be issued an SFOC. That's a Special Flight Operation Certificate. And I can tell you that Special Flight Operation Certificate is also given to a regular airplane that does aerial photography. It's also given to a regular airplane that does surveillance work and that sort of thing. So the SFOC didn't come into birth just because of drones. It's something that we had to do something quickly, and we had to do something now. We had regulations in place, and we knew that, hey, look at this, like these drones are doing aerial survey work. They're doing photography work. So at least let's marry them up so that we can have some semblance of control. And again, the problem is not the responsible people who want to do it right. It's the ones that we don't even know about. So a big part of our work now is safety education and promotion. We want to start going to trade shows. We want the manufacturers to start, having some of our safety promotion with the packaging. And there's so many things that we can do. But as I say, it's all relatively new to us as well. But there are things being done. So we're going to talk a bit about the regs, the regulations, as we say. Permission to operate Special Flight Operation Certificate, SFOC. UAV exemption, some of the challenges ahead in the future regulations. And I think for our panel here, that's probably the area that interests them the most. Here are some acronyms. Government acronyms kind of go together, and all associations and organizations have acronyms. But I've not been involved with these organizations, but this came from Mark Wunenberg in Ottawa, who is one of the several leads in the UAV project. But these are the groups that Transport Canada has been actively involved with, and I'm talking at least for the past 5 years, and I may be corrected, it probably longer. But the TCUAV, which is Unmanned Aerial Vehicle Systems Program Design Group, ICAO, International Civil Aviation Organization, Remotely Piloted Aircraft Systems. There's no test after this, trust me. I wouldn't pass it. ICAO Small UAS, Unmanned Advisory Group, Regulatory Cooperation Council with the TC and the FAA working together. The FAA Micro UAV Aviation Rulemaking Committee, and the Arctic Monitoring and Assessment Program that's going on right now with unmanned aerial systems. We use those terms interchangeably. When we have a UAV, we have line of sight. We're actually controlling it in a sense that it's not autonomous. We have some inputs. But, when you're looking at these drones that fly, the pilots flying it from North Dakota are flying these drones in Afghanistan, which is amazing. That's a UAV or a UAS system, you might say. To a lesser extent, we're also involved in the JARIS, the Joint Authorities for Rulemaking and Unmanned Systems with the Europeans. And RTCA is just an acronym like IBM. They're a standards development organization with the FAA that we're working with as well, and the European Aviation Safety Agency. So this has been ongoing work. So I know sometimes we don't see the tangible things that are being done, but it takes a lot of work to harmonize, especially with the U.S. and our European partners and so forth. So the Aeronautics Act, referring to my notes, the Aeronautics Act, basically, we're asking the writ large question here as to whether or not a UAV, an unmanned air vehicle, whether or not it's an actual aircraft, and the Aeronautics Act tells us that it is. And this also tells us that there are two ministers responsible for the regulation of UAVs, and one of them being the Minister of Transport, Civil Aviation, and the other being the Minister of Defense. So that is to say that in some areas of operation, even though we may not be directly involved, somebody is regulating it, which would be the Minister of Defense and their counterparts. So currently, regulations are looking at things as to whether you're flying recreationally or non-recreationally. The future regulations will not have this attached to it, but we'll talk about this right now. So when we're flying recreationally, the only regulation we have in place, only because model airplanes, UAVs, if you want to call them, have been around for a long time. And this was, no person shall fly a model aircraft or kite or launch a model rocket or a rocket of any type used in fireworks display into cloud, that's the big one, or in a manner that is likely to be hazardous to aviation safety. Of course, we want people and property to be safe, but ultimately we are managing a safe aviation safety system, a safe aviation system. So when it comes to privacy issues, we get calls all the time about privacy issues, or somebody is down in the park and they're causing a nuisance and it could be hazardous to somebody. That's got very little to do with the aviation safety system or the system safety of our aviation system. Of course, we're concerned, but that's not our area of mandate. It's not our jurisdiction. If a person was being harassed, I would say call the police. If your privacy issues are being compromised, then there's a privacy commissioner. Of course, we're concerned about those things, but we have a large, robust, dynamic aviation system that has to be maintained. So if a person is flying a model airplane for fun, and they are creating a hazard to the aviation system, they're creating an aviation hazard, this is not a designated provision, which means there are no mandated penalties that we can give, but they can certainly be prosecuted. And this threat, I guess you might say, has been around since we started flying model airplanes. We live in a very open, safe society, and people can do, as you were saying, some dumb things. And ultimately, we need to continue to educate and promote, and that's all we can do. We can only regulate the people we know about. And other than that, if somebody does violate something like this or creates a hazard, then they'll be prosecuted, for sure.
And I'll just kind of add, you mentioned about, the privacy issues. I think that's the other part people need to be aware of. It's not just aviation law. The entire criminal code applies to what you're doing. So, you don't get a free-for-all because you're an SFOC. There are those privacy issues and nuisance issues. So it's another part. Like even Parks Canada, for example, doesn't allow drones on property. So don't just look at one path as the only rules. There's a lot of other conditions out there.
That's true. We had a gentleman in Moncton who was, eventually, he was in a public park and he kept using it as a driving range with his golf balls, right? Now, I know that's not a very smart thing to do, but ultimately he was creating the hazards to people. So he was charged with that, because he was creating a hazard. So it doesn't matter what you're creating a hazard with, whether it be a small drone, a baseball bat, or a golf ball. You can't be endangering the lives of people, but that's another area, and that's the police, and that could be prosecuted. The Model Aeronautics Association of Canada started in 1949. 11 folks started this organization in Canada, and they fly model airplanes for fun. And today they're up to 13,000 members, and they're all across the country. And I must say they're working diligently with Transport Canada to ensure that the word is out there on, again, best practices, using common sense. If you want to fly commercially in any fashion, you can fly, and I'll talk about that in a minute. You can fly either by getting an SFOC or you can fly under an exemption. But the exemption is so restrictive, the best path, or I feel the easiest path for most commercial operators, is to get the SFOC. Then they're less restricted in what they can do. An unmanned air vehicle really is anything other than a model aircraft. So we define a model aircraft as, it could be what you would look like a UAV, but a model aircraft or is considered anything that you're doing for fun, recreationally. If you're using it for any type of commercial venture, which is surveying, if you're taking pictures for your business, for your website, if you're doing any type of media work and so forth, all of those are considered to be, they're not model airplanes, they're not flying solely for fun. So therefore we have a set of regulations that are in place. These are the definitions basically that tell us 60241 a requirement to hold an operating certificate, an SFOC. This was pre-drones because airplanes do use, apply for special flight operation certificates depending on the type of operation, and you must comply with the SFOC once you have it in place. And I know from my notes here that when it comes to when it's designated, for instance, if you in 60241, as you can see, the second bullet, it says that you must hold an operating certificate. But 60241 also says that if you should be and you're not, and you know that you should be complying with an SFOC and you're not, this is designated. So there are provisions for fines. An example would be a $5,000 fine for an individual, up to $25,000 for an organization. And 60366, requirement to comply, could be a $3,000 fine to an individual and a $15,000 fine for an organization. I'm not trying to sit here and this is the worst case scenario. The best thing is to do it right. I can tell you that right now, one of the roles that we have is we're getting all kinds of phone calls, complaints. We're getting folks that, they're up on website and so forth. It's run through our enforcement people, but the first point, it depends on what's being done. But the first action that we're taking is they're sending it to me. I'm making direct phone calls to these people. I'm sending them emails. I'm educating them. And we're tracking that. So now they know. And to be honest with you, the reception has been incredibly great. It's been very positive. Some people don't even know they don't know. As they call that, unconsciously incompetent. You just don't even know you don't know, right? So it's about education. This is new. A lot of this is new for a lot of people, and the proliferation of these drones has been quite incredible, really. But you're going to see some interesting stats coming up here. So the two ways to operate a UAV. So we're not talking model airplanes anymore because it's not for fun. Now it's the UAV world. You can apply for the Special Flight Operation Certificate, SFOC, or you can operate under two sets of exemptions. 2 kilograms or less, and above 2 kilograms, but not exceeding 25 kilograms. Now, 25 kilograms is getting to be a pretty heavy machine, right? 2.2 pounds per kilogram, for those of us that were in grade 5 when we did the conversion. Anyway,
If I could just,
yes, go ahead.
Just to put it into context
Yeah.
for people here, the Phantom is under 2 kilograms. So the machine that most of you would use and adapt for your students is the Phantom, and you would fall under the 2 kilogram
under the 2
exemptions.
kilograms.
And even the larger system that we show, which is, it's I think it's 800 millimeters wide. It's only about 7.5 kilograms. So to get to 25 kilograms is a massive system.
Maybe you're transporting cargo or something.
Yeah. Working for Amazon or something.
Yeah.
Like that, yeah.
So the exemptions work for some people. Let's just stick on the SFOCs for a second. So the way it works is we talk about an SFOC application. These gentlemen are very familiar with how it works, but just for your information, we're going to hand these out if you haven't got them already. It links us to our direct website, which has other links as well, that talks about all these SFOC conditions and all the information that you need to know. We have connections to advisors, information circulars. We have best practices. We even link you to what we call as our staff instruction. It's nice and thick, but it's for our staff, but we want people to be able to see what the processes are. And the up front of this document is really just really good information. So that's available to everyone, and it's just simply by getting on our website. So education is the key, and awareness, so we can become consciously competent at some point. So basically, there is a link. There's an email link. We call it an application, but really it's an email link that goes into our system here in the Atlantic region. And you say who you are, what you want to do, what's the scope of your operation. All the details you can give them, please put it in your email, and that's going to go to one of our operational inspectors who will call that person directly or the organization. And you both have probably worked with some of our inspectors already. And it's a one-on-one, right? It's really a deliberate, direct contact to get all the information that we can, and all the conditions that are placed on the SFOC are all guided by our staff instruction to our staff, but it's all risk-based. The thing is that the second bullet talks about the operating certificates are issued once an applicant demonstrates that risks can be managed to an acceptable level, and that is our definition of safety. Managing risks to acceptable levels. Because as the top bullet says, everyone is dealt by case-by-case basis. Because of all these complexities, I can tell you, the more complex, the more time it's going to take the inspector and the organization to come up with a good plan on how you're going to make it work. Applicants are responsible for ensuring the safety of persons and property on the ground and other airspace users. You know, we have to ensure that's not jeopardized. But it's a team effort, right? We're all working together to make it work.
It's still 100,000, isn't it, in liability?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm not going to get into this a whole lot other than when we're looking at the staff instruction, when our operational inspectors are actually creating these, are helping to build the SFOC that's going to be issued to the organization or the person. There's different criteria of compliant operator. Restricted operator just talks, that alludes to being near an airport environment where in the conditions you have to coordinate with ATC, around airports. There could be some survey work that's being done or whatever. And then the simpler it gets, I guess, the easier it is to just simply go through the process, but not to get into too much detail. These are just some of the samples that you might see on an SFOC. At least 5 nautical miles away from any aerodrome or built-up area pretty much is what you'll see, but maybe below 300 feet, could be daytime only. Not to go through all of these, but no overflight over persons, specified weather limits, so forth and so on. So these are just examples of some of the sample safety conditions that you'd have to meet on your SFOC. Now, this is interesting. I don't have a laser pointer, but this is the number of SFOCs that by region have been issued. Let me just get to this here because I want to make a point on that. The Atlantic region, can you see it? Right? Atlantic region down there. I'll use my finger pointer instead of the laser pointer. Anyway, so 158 SFOCs were issued in 2015. But look in 2010, 9. 2011, 34. Then we had 20, then 95. 161 in 2014. 158 in 2015. That's for the whole year. We are now just getting into the busy time of the year. And already we are up to 129 FSOCs issued this year already. And this is not the busy season. We're just, you know, I'm going to say we're going to be very close to probably over 200 this year. This is the same trend across the whole country. So it's telling us two things. It's telling us that people are wanting to comply, and it's also giving us a sense of the level of activity that's coming around. I get at least right now about 7 or 8 calls a week of people that I want to start a photography business. I want to do some survey work. So I send them all the information. I explain to them what they need to do. It goes to our operational inspectors, and it goes from there. So it's growing. 2,400 issued across the country, and as I say, the trend is equally the same everywhere.
And we've seen that as well because we post a lot on. We've been asked by people about the process more in the last probably 6 months than we did 2 years prior. So
Exactly.
There are people now who are taking it much more serious.
And guys, we need to speed this up if we're going to have
Okay,
time
I'm
for
just going to go
questions.
really quick here. So we talked about, just so you know, there's exemptions. You can also fly by exemption, but the under 2 kilograms, there's 37 conditions that you need to follow, and 2 kilograms up to 25 kilograms, there's 58 conditions. All I can tell you is that 2 of them that are very difficult to comply with are that you have to be 5 nautical miles away, 9 kilometers away from an airport, airdrome, landing site, or 9 kilometers away from any built-up area, which is defined as anything bigger than a homestead. So pretty much any little clump of houses is a built-up area. Hence, that's why most people go through the SFOC process, and that's just the SFOC process as it is. So moving forward, the future regulatory approach. We're probably going to be issuing when this comes into place, the SFOC issuance would probably decrease by about 90%. We are getting out of the SFOC business because we're going to be defining the new regulations by category. Small complex, small limited, and very small. And we need to better address the model aircraft question. That is on the table to better address the recreational flyer and the model aircraft questions with the concerns and implications that we talked about earlier. We're going to be addressing some other terminologies, but beyond line of sight, that's like out of sight, and autonomous, which means you program it and you walk away from it, are out of the scope of the new regulations at this point. That'll come in the future, but the technology needs to catch up with that kind of a thing, right? And SFOCs will remain for operations not covered by the new proposed amendment change, which is beyond vertical line of sight, or above 25 kilograms. We're still going to need an SFOC. But here's the crux of it for the new changes, and it's going to be based on anything less than, it's going to be around 1 kilo. Anything less than 1 kilogram is going to be considered a toy. If you can fly it in your house and it bounces off someone's head and it does nothing, I don't care. Okay, so the very small ones are going to be considered to be a toy. So the cutoff is going to be into the 1 kilogram size, but it's going to be based on the operation. So let's start on the very small. Okay, will you need a permit of any sort? No. Knowledge test, yep, there's going to be something online. We're going to expect people to at least go online and make themselves cognizant of some best practices. No medical required, and don't be scared by the medical. It's a declaration that you're a fit person. But you need to have had a sign off from your your family doctor as well. It's not an aviation medical. So age of 16, no supervision required. There's not going to be any design standard required, no registration required, owner-operator maintenance on your own machine, no operation certificate. You'll be able to fly in a built-up area because, as I said, it's considered a toy. Near aerodromes, still not recommended, and to be determined on liability insurance. The small limited are going to be operations that are near airports, small limited will be in areas, again, that are away from airports, away from highly built up areas. But a knowledge test will be required. And again, a lot of X's there, so liability insurance will be required as well. Small complex, and what I mean by small is it's under the 25 kilogram range. It's above the 1 kilogram, but the small complex will require a permit. What I'm saying about these regulations is that if you've got the permit and you've got the check marks, you've done the knowledge test, you've got the declaration of medical, 16 years of age to operate, the aircraft has a design standard, it's going to have to be registered with markings. This is flying complex airplanes in downtown Toronto and that sort of thing. You will have the permit to do it, called a drone permit, as a private pilot permit, same idea. With that comes a whole set of regulations and things that you should or you can't do and things you can do. That's the work that's going on behind the scenes right now, but this will eliminate the SFOC application. You'll have the license, the permit to do it. It'll be your responsibility to make sure you comply with the regulations in and around those permits.
Just to clarify for people, so the small is under
1 kilogram.
Under 1 kilogram.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you're saying a pilot permit. So are we talking about an actual pilot's license?
It will be it'll be a permit for the UAVs. So
Okay.
it'll be based on a knowledge test. And we've got all the criteria already for the knowledge that you require in the areas that you require. UAV schools will obviously be sprouting up, but it's not going to take long to get the knowledge and to write the exam. All these details are being worked out, but this is where we're moving to because it's so large and there's so many. For us to be trying to issue SFOCs to everyone, it's just not practical for the operator, not practical for the regulator. But having said that, we're looking at least for small, complex operations, that's under 25 kilograms, but you're going to be flying complex areas in and around airports, so forth and so on. Coordination will still have to occur, but that'll be, as they say, the devil's in the details in terms of really understanding what you're going to have to do to fly your permit legally. So it's going to, we believe, eliminate a lot of the disruption of business, and at the same time, it's going to relieve people, it's going to help us in our resources as well. I think we should probably end there. The challenges we've already talked about, there are technological challenges, there are licensing challenges, redefining what model airplanes are and that sort of thing. But all that work is ongoing, and we hope to have the regulations in place by 2017. These are a whole list of sites that you can go on, UAV instruction, TC UAV advisor circulars, on and on. But just go to the main website. I've given you the contact for that, and you should be able to link to all of these. So I'll leave it at that.
Are we
Thank you.
ready
Thank
for
you.
questions? We have about 8 minutes.
Yeah, just I wanted to say briefly, when we talk about the regulations, Edgar will correct me, we're talking about basically ground school, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
We're talking about understanding meteorology, radio, those kind of things, terminologies and that kind of stuff. So nobody should panic. And you don't have to go to a drone school. You can teach this stuff to yourself. You can learn it online. You can learn it on the Transport Canada site.
Yeah, all this information is there now. It's already in place and not complex,
So yeah, now we'll open it to questions.
And we have a mic, so since I have the mic, I'm going to ask the first question.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was this disembodied voice.
Any discussions on tethered UAVs with respect to, do they apply the same new rules? Are they in the consideration?
You know what? That's a very good question. And having been given this portfolio a month ago, I've not even sat in on the first working group, but I'm going to make a note of that, and we will be in touch. But that's a very good question.
The answer is, from what my understanding is, tethered doesn't matter. It's not a loophole to get out. So.
Yes. Yeah, and that's what I...
Because
Okay, that was the question.
Yeah,
Okay.
Transport Canada says a kite, right? So a tethered
Yeah.
drone, even though I would like them not to fall under Transport Canada, unfortunately they don't, because CNN is using one. They're using a tethered drone, and a number of news agencies are using tethered drones. And there is a certain... It's not so much about getting out of the regulations as they're safer to fly, I think, from a technological
But you could
point
probably
of view.
go higher, and if you're in any big center at all, you're on the approaches to airports and aviation airline approaches, right, and so forth. So those are the things, obviously, why it's still a concern. Yes. Or first,
Bring the mic to you.
Disembodied voice. Couple questions. So, as educators, our students are covered under our insurance policy. So, where the check mark says insurance, is that the college's insurance that you'll
Yeah.
accept as
We have,
part of their?
it goes on our rider, is what we do, but it's specific aviation insurance. And you need $100,000 liability. We have considerably more than that. But it's not that onerous. It's not that crushing. Like, you think this is going to be expensive, but when you finally look into it and you put it onto the rider, it's not that much money.
The one thing I'd add to that, and like I say, for most schools have kind of that catch-all policy. If you're doing it outside of that, be careful, because general liability doesn't carry aviation coverage. So if you were if you're doing this privately and you have already have your general liability for your camera business, that typically doesn't apply. You do need a aviation-specific policy.
Right. And the second question is for the radio license. So, will the students have to get their ham radio license? Will the students have to get their ham radio license also, where it says the radio license?
Again, that's a very good question, but we have radio telephony license, funny little name. But again, the license has been around since the 1940s, but it's a radio license that you would, but again, if there's no requirement to be talking on a radio, there'll be no requirement to have a radio license. But go ahead if you know more.
No, I don't. I was just going to say, but our students, I just have a whole bunch more material to put in my course, because they're going to have to learn that stuff. They're going to have to meet those requirements.
Moving ahead, the more you can be prepared, as you know, the material's all there. We've got all the stuff that you should probably be studying in terms of, being ready for this is already there. And the knowledge level is certainly not at the depth of a private pilot, but it touches on all the same kind of topics. It's good. It's good awareness. But again, why not get the radio telephone license? Because that's really easy to get.
And the information, again, it's on Industry Canada's site. It's literally, if you couldn't learn it in an hour, I'd be quite surprised. It's not
complex.
It's not as complicated as you think it is.
I mean, they use big words, and when you start reading these words and everything, it gets confusing and everything. But when you boil it down, it's not that difficult. Anyone else?
Yes, hi. I just want to be clear. I just want to make sure I understand, because I'm from London, Ontario, and we have students that have their own drones, and of course, they go rogue when they go out and shoot their narratives, and we found out later they were using drones, and then we went into the whole policy part. But we're also very close to airports and 2 university helipads, so they're not shooting anything in that area. Do I understand that under the new one, we would be in that small complex category?
You would be in the small complex, but then again, it may be that you will be required, I haven't seen the draft yet, so
Okay.
All the conditions that we would normally give would come with the understanding when you get the permit that you'll be responsible to contact ATC and coordinate, and all those sorts of things will still have to be carried out.
Okay.
It's just that it won't be us having to tell you that all the time. You'll have the permit and you'll understand that has to be done,
If
right?
if I'm getting you correct, these are student drones, right?
Yes.
The students own the drones?
Yes, we don't have a drone.
So then they're recreational flyers.
If they're recreational flyers at this time, that's what I'm getting at. In the future, it doesn't matter if you're commercial or recreational. If you're flying a small drone in a complex environment, you will need a permit.
Okay.
You will need the insurance, So it's going to eliminate the whole SFOC application. You're going to be able to fly all over the province, all over Atlantic Canada with the permit, but you have to, like a private pilot license, you have things that you need to be able to do and things that you can't do. If you're in contravention of the Canadian aviation regulations, then so be it, right?
So that would be something that we would be checking on whether they have the policy, the license, if they are individual.
If you're hiring them as, if they're at your school, yeah.
If
the
they're
organization.
doing projects. Right now, we don't include, anything that's gathered by a drone is what we call illegal footage. So we don't allow it in any of our projects.
Sounds like bootleg.
I think one of the things that, is what instructors should look at now, and you may say, well, this is a hassle. Now I got to get somebody who wants to teach them these things and go on the Transport Canada site and learn radio telephony or meteorology or whatever it is. But the way I looked at it, and one of the ways that I presented it to the people at the College of the North Atlantic was, I'm making our students more employable because I'm giving them more skills, and I'm giving them skills that right now, these are important skills that people want. So by Transport Canada doing this, they're doing you a favor, and because now you can teach the students this, and when they graduate, they're going to have a drone pilot card. They're going to be able to fly for anyone, depending on what the size of the drone is. And you've just given them new skills. And these are cutting edge skills. In the US, there is actually a university that offers degrees in UAV piloting. And the average salary is $100,000 a year. But I believe by 2020, the drone industry is going to be worth something like $88 billion or something like that. To put that into perspective, the gamer industry, video games, is worth $100 billion. Now, Steve just gave me the 1 minute finger.
One question left.
Oh, one question left. Okay.
Just based on these certificates or licenses that are coming up, are they all based on individuals, or are they the owners, or in your case, the program who has these certificates?
It's my understanding that the permit will be the person. And if you want to work for the organization, or, that'll be up to the person in the organization.
Then whether it be learner permits?
There won't be learner permits per se. You either have it or you don't, right? So
if you're training or learning, how?
I'm not sure if I understand it. So will the student have to get the permit, or will the college have to get the permit?
I think it's becoming more like the pilots.
The pilot will
It's
have to get the
individual,
permit.
where right
Okay.
now, like for example, the SFOC came before the organization, where the permit, it really is, it's a knowledge test.
it's going to be a knowledge test for the drone
individual.
pilot, and the school will be able to, as they do now. They have you do training now and so forth, and a lot of it is knowledge testing and so forth, and they get some hands-on experience. But see, those details in the standard, I'm talking about what are the regulations, but around all the regulations, there are going to be standards that have to be met, and I'm just haven't seen any of the draft material that's being worked on, but certainly with the regulations will be standards, and again, those are the details that are coming down the road.
From the way, what I'm getting from that, and I know like Transport Canada will make an announcement, and thanks for making that here. They'll make an announcement, but then it defines itself as the regulations actually come out. But from the way I'm taking this is, every student will need a card, a drone permit, but that's a good thing. Anyway, I think we got to wrap it up.
I will wrap it up and say thank you so much. This is awesome. I'm hoping that maybe you're going to join us for lunch and stick around.